People who've been clinically dead and came back. What did you see? I was bleeding to death from an upper GI bleed. I felt like I was slowly shedding my ego, and the anxiety that I held constantly was going away. Like I remember thinking that nothing on earth was my problem anymore. I was becoming part of the universe in a million different ways, and it was beautiful. Meanwhile, an EMT was screwing something into my humerus to give me blood and fluids, which is supposed to be very painful because it pushes stuff out of the way inside the bone. I didn't feel it at all, or the pain or sickness. I was above it all, aware, but not watching. I'm glad, though, that I was resuscitated because life is good now. Thank you to EMTs and people who give blood. Next story. Accidental OD as a kid. Keep your prescriptions locked up away from kids, folks. My heart stopped. I remember just darkness. But I don't remember being afraid or anything, just peaceful and warm. It was the most peaceful thing I've ever experienced. I don't know if anything exists beyond that peaceful darkness because the doctors resuscitated me. But if that's all there is after the meat suit shuts down, I'm okay with it. Next story. Briefly been dead on 2 occasions, both times at the hospital. Saw nothing. Only notable difference between being regular unconscious and dead was the complete lack of continuity. After waking up, I had no sense of time passed, despite still being in the same room, surrounded by the same people. If you told me I'd been gone for 5 hours, days, months, or even years, I would have believed you in those very first seconds. Went back to normal rather quickly, though. Next story. Was declared medically dead for 3 minutes and 11 seconds as a 15-year-old who ended up getting meningococcal years ago at a house party. I remember being on a beach, sitting on a wharf with my feet in the water, chatting to my older brother who was alive and well. I was big into Final Fantasy X back then, and it was almost like my interpretation of Besaid Beach. Felt like forever we were doing this. Then I felt actual water on my feet, and I woke from a long coma because somebody was in my hospital room and had spilt water over me. I just remember how crap and foul my mouth felt and tasted as I started regaining my senses. Okay, I haven't been in a coma, but I've had the same sort of thing with the dreams, right? And it's impossible to tell whether that happening woke you up or if you were going to wake up anyway and that was the trigger. But isn't it so weird to think that this person in a deep coma, probably, was woken up because someone splashed water on their feet by accident? Makes you wonder, why don't we just try it every day? There's probably some reason. Next story. This was in 2021. I caught COVID a second time and I recovered initially. 10 days later, I could barely breathe and wound up in the ICU. I don't remember much, but I remember people in those CDC suits scrambling around me and a doctor telling me they were going to give me some experimental drug. The next thing I know, everything is black and I'm falling, and it was warm and comfortable. Like when I was a kid watching a movie right before I fell asleep on the couch. I felt safe, I felt relaxed, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace and just knew that I was dying and this was it, and it was okay. And then I heard my son calling for me. I remember this white, hot rage just started burning in my chest, painful but focused. I started fighting that feeling and felt myself stop falling down and slowly start falling upwards. Then I'm blinking, and there's that doctor telling me how happy he was to see me awake, and the staff looked happy as well. I don't remember leaving the hospital or how long I was there, but waking up at home. This still keeps me up at night. Next story. I wasn't clinically dead, but I was involved in a drunken car accident when I was 17. I was the passenger coming back from a party. The driver was intoxicated and we had a head-on a back road in the country. It took 45 minutes for police, fire, and ambulance. First, I'd like to say I was raised by hippie parents who are against most forms of religion and government organizations. Never once was I taught about God or went to church, except for my cousin's weddings. When I came to, I was in a dark space. I saw a man who was roughly 2 stories high looking down on me. In his hands, he held an urn/vase type implement with long golden handles that met at an opening. As I looked up at him, he began to pour a clear fluid over me from the urn. Immediately, I felt cold and had the shivering sensation. It was thicker than water, but similar in appearance. After a few moments, I asked what he was doing. He said he was cleansing me. As I looked up again to reply, I saw he had turned the urn upside down and brought it down on top of me. After this, all I saw was blackness, but I felt as though people were around me waiting. Suddenly, I realized I must be dead. I started to panic and think, no, this can't be. I didn't want to die. I started to feel my body tilt, and instead of being upright, I felt as though I was now hovering at a 45-degree angle. I then thought, if I'm dead, where's God? In the far distance, I saw a pinprick of light, like a star in the night sky. I then felt myself slightly pulled towards this object as if I were a magnet. I took a deep breath in and noticed I began to move forward once more. Now I began to continuously breathe in and out, each time accelerating the pull. Now I started to feel waves rolling over me of absolute love, I guess, which gave me a goosebump feeling. It felt greater than any mother's love possible. This continued until I was inches away from the light, which now appeared as a glowing, perfect sphere or orb. I felt tears of joy, and I desperately wanted to become one with the light. The light spoke and said, "Love everyone and love everything. Have no fear." However, just as I was about to merge/touch it, I woke up. It was another passenger in the backseat kicking me in the face as they tried to exit our rolled vehicle. My first thoughts coming to were that I wanted to go back there, and that this world wasn't the real one. Next story. It's possible I nearly died during surgery a few years ago. From what I was told, I came super close to doing so. Anyway, I just recall standing in a white void, being able to see my own feet planted firmly on the floor, and having this overwhelming feeling of warmth, comfort, and peacefulness. I also recall still feeling like myself, and I had the ability to remember some memories, but only a limited amount of them. It was such an odd and unforgettable experience. Next story. I don't think I was clinically dead, but this is the closest I've ever been. Here's my experience. I was a teenager trying to install a headphone port on my old TV. I knew the cathode tube could store up to 30,000 volts of electricity, and touching it could end me instantly. So I made sure to unplug the TV and then tried to switch it on to fully discharge the tube before working inside of it. I installed the port, welded the cables, and switched on the TV to test. It didn't work. I switched it off, unplugged it, tried to turn it on again while unplugged to discharge it and check the connections. Everything seemed fine. I welded the cables again to make sure they were properly connected. Then I plugged the TV back in, switched it on, and tested it. Still nothing. I realized I would have to test it while it was on to get immediate feedback. So I started touching the cables with a screwdriver while the TV was running. The handle of the screwdriver was plastic, and when the tip touched one of the cables, suddenly I got sound, and I could hear the TV through the headphones. I just needed to weld that cable better. I tried to push the cable itself with the screwdriver, but holding it from the back made it difficult. To get a bit more stability, I put my index finger on the metallic part of the screwdriver. The moment my finger touched the metallic part, I saw a bridge of light as thick as my pinky finger jump from the TV tube to the tip of the screwdriver. I heard a loud noise, and the force of it combined with the shock made me jump backward. I landed on my bed, face up, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't see anything. Everything was white. I wasn't blind, but it felt like I was looking directly at the sun, even with my eyes shut. I don't remember how long I was like that. I don't know if I lost consciousness. Eventually, shadows started forming on the ceiling. I began recognizing the light in my room and the shapes of my curtains. Then I heard a distant rattling sound, like a children's toy slowing down. The rattle grew closer and slower until it sounded like a drum. Bum, bum, bum. It became more stable. That's when I realized the sound was my heart. I could see clearly again. My ceiling, my room, everything was back to normal. After that, I closed up the TV, tested it, and it was working fine. I never tried to open or touch the inside of a TV again. You know, OP, I think that's a good call. As far as I'm concerned, you're living on borrowed time, man. Electricity is not to be screwed with. Most of the time, you can't even see it, and it can absolutely do serious damage. The fact you made it out of there, the fact you were blasted back instead of just stuck to holding the screwdriver or something, that's a miracle, man. If any of you are working with electronics, be safe. Please. Next story. I was resuscitated twice, and I can't say that what I saw was at those moments, but over the course of a few days when I was in a medically induced coma. So a lot of this could be considered dreams or hallucinations. But, for what it's worth, I'll write what I can remember. Even immediately after waking up, all of this was very blurry, and as time has passed, it's even harder to remember specifics. But I remember being in a very odd landscape. Just moving my eyes or head would cause massive changes. For example, long corridors turning into mountains, then into large flat plains. Someone I know who's done DMT said that this could be seeing higher dimensions, but I'm not sure. I don't remember geometric shapes or colors, just a mind-boggling landscape I couldn't make heads or tails of. I do know I wasn't alone, and that there was something else there that I was friendly with at times and also absolutely terrified of at times. It's all very vague, and I'm not sure if it was the same entity or not at all times, but it seemed like it. There was also an incredible feeling of nostalgia, like I knew this entity and hadn't seen them in a very long time. Not sure what to make of it. I don't consider myself religious, so this is no claim to have seen God or anything, just that I interacted with someone or something. All I do know is the experience has made me immensely afraid of what comes after this life. I've always been more interested and curious to the afterlife, if there even is one, but now it's so scary to me that even the thought of it gives me a surreal chill down my spine, an instinctual fear, you could say. And when I say I was terrified of this thing, I mean a complete and unquestionable terror. If I'd been capable of it, I would have lost all bladder and bowel control. I remember screaming and screaming. Then, just as quick, the feeling of being around old friends. The strange and unforgettable feelings while also being completely unable to remember any specifics of anything that happened just make me wonder even more about what it means to be dead or alive. But anyhow, that's what little insight I have on it. From what I've read and talked with other people about, it seems no two people have had the same experience, and I ultimately think I hallucinated or dreamt most of this up. There's a natural process in the human brains that essentially dumps a DMT into you when you're dying or near death, so I just assume that's what leads to most people's experiences. Next story. Was in status ellipticus and alone in my apartment. Should have died then. Everything was peaceful, like you don't have a body, but you know everything about the space around you. There's no uncertainty. There's a presence everywhere, and you are a part of it. One thing I found strange is that it doesn't matter if it's light or dark. It's the presence that matters, and death is nothing more than a gateway or guide to something beyond. But you must wait for your time. Woke up afterwards with that experience still burned in my subconscious, while my brain was still rebooting trying to get my memories back. I can't help but notice that most of these describe it as, oh, it's so, calm and peaceful, like a warmth and a love. And the last OP, not the one we just read, was the only one to be like, actually, sometimes I was horrified. It was the worst experience of my life. So, if it's like an odds thing, like, a 1 in 10 to be absolutely terrified, sure hope I'm lucky when I go. Let's see if there are any more about being freaked out or if it's all just nice and peaceful. Maybe that one OP was just an anomaly. Next story. I work in the ICU as a nurse, so I think I perhaps can give better insight than most in this topic. Long story short, most people say after we get their ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation, and have been extubated, their experience after code blue, aka when their heart has completely stopped, they experience a complete blackout. There's some that do say it's a very deep sleep and they just woke up like they had a nightmare. No one has ever told me, though, that they've seen some sort of white light or an indication of what some movies portray. Next story. I had a near-death / out-of-body experience. Although it wasn't in a clinical setting, it was from an unintentional drug overdose. Full disclosure, I'm an H addict with over 6.5 years clean. I remember thinking immediately after dosing that I had done too much. It came on too quick, and I can remember the second before everything faded, and then nothingness. I recall freaking out in my mind because I couldn't feel or perceive my body or any of my senses. I remember clearly being scared and confused, and then I had a realization that I was ODing, and that I must be dying or close to death. I then began to realize I could see my own body slumped in my car from above, like I was looking through my window on a ladder. I remember clearly screaming for help, and that I didn't want to die, that this wasn't how I wanted my family to find me. I also remember a floating, calm feeling once the realization that I was dying hit me. It felt like I was surrounded by waves of peacefulness. I'm not really sure how else to describe it. Maybe it was acceptance? I also remember perceiving a lightish blue light, not unlike seeing it at the end of a tunnel. Being above my own body and seeing it while also realizing I was still aware of my own consciousness confused me, and then I started calling for my mom to help me because I, quote, didn't want to die the wrong way and get stuck somewhere. My mom had died a few years prior. It might sound crazy, but then I remember the feeling I would get as a kid when I would hug my mom. I liken it to her hearing me and coming to help. I kept saying I didn't want to die yet, and then I felt like I was given a choice, to move forward or to go back. I chose to go back. Then everything I just described started to fade, and the next thing I remember is feeling my fingers on my right hand twitching and being sweaty. Then I realized I could feel my own breath again and knew I was back in my body. I started breathing heavily and crying as I opened my eyes and realized I was back. I took a couple minutes to compose myself. My whole body felt exhausted and worn out. I drove home crying and yelling at myself the whole way. I got and stayed clean a few months after that, thanks to getting sent to jail for a few months. I've always been into the woo stuff like UFOs. My experience still sticks with me. I think about it quite often and has led to a realization that there is definitely a spiritual or other side of life and consciousness after we die. I can't dismiss it by saying it was just the drugs. Anyone who's been an addict will tell you H isn't like that. Plus, I was aware and perceiving my own body from above and having conscious thoughts through the whole experience. Sorry if this is too long. This is my experience, and I'm certain it was as real to me as I'm typing this now. There's a whole lot to consciousness and to life we don't understand. Hope you don't think I'm too crazy. Next story. My mom was allergic to bees. She got stung several times while working outside. It took a few minutes for them to bring her back. She said it was nothing. No pain, no fear, no sadness or regret. She didn't feel her body or see anything, not even darkness. Just nothing. She was a religious person, and I really hope she got to go to whatever she thought afterlife is. Maybe the nothing place was just like a waiting room. If there's a waiting room before death, there better be at least some, hold music or something to let me know I'm still, my spirit's still here. Otherwise, what a horrifying waiting experience. A weird cruelty right at the end of life. Next story. Not me, but my grandfather. He had a heart attack. He said he felt like he fainted, and then he was all warm and happy, like everything was going to be okay. Everything was black, but he saw a faint light far away. He said it felt like either he floated towards it or it floated towards him, he doesn't know, and the light turned into a porch from his childhood home where his mum was sitting in a rocking chair. She had been dead for 10 plus years at that time. He was so happy to see her. She looked at him and smiled and said, "No, not right now, love." And then he woke up in the ambulance. Next story. Got in a head-on bike collision when I was 23. I remember adrenaline kicking in and quickly realizing I couldn't move. I kind of freaked out and then just waited. No pain, no feelings, no tears. It was around 12 p.m., so I do remember the blinding sunlight. I closed my eyes and woke up in the hospital the next day. Apparently I died from a heart attack on the way to the hospital and was resuscitated. To be honest, the worst thing from that was waking up and feeling hungover and beat up at the same time. Would not recommend scaring your mom on her birthday month like that. Next story. My dad experienced this 12 years ago during cardiac arrest. He said there were no words to describe it, and beautiful doesn't come close. He won't quite say it, but I think he wishes he didn't come back solely due to how great it seemed. He said when his real time comes, he will have no regrets, and he knows he's going to be 100% at peace. He has talked about it quite a few times and makes it sound downright exciting. Next story. I don't know if I were ever clinically dead, but I will tell you a quick story about me. I got into a pretty spicy car accident and spent the night in a ditch before waking up and calling an ambulance. Everything was pretty fuzzy for a bit. I remember being loaded into a helicopter, being in a hospital bed, people going in and out. I smashed my face into the dashboard, so they had to pull pieces of my skull out of my brain. It was a Catholic hospital or something, so before I went into brain surgery, they asked if a priest could come talk to me. I didn't care, so I said, "Yeah, that's fine, send him in." I remember some of what this guy said, but what really stands out to this day was him talking about how great God is. Specifically him saying, "You are going into a pretty dangerous surgery, but when you come back, I want you to remember that feeling of waking up and knowing how much God loves you." Anyway, something happened in the surgery, and I guess my heart stopped and they had to counteract the drugs they used to put me under, which also counteracted the painkillers. I woke up blind and in the worst pain of my life while it felt like people were holding me down. So, I think that was a sign that I'm going to hell when I finally get my ticket punched, and that was what hell will be like. Next story. Don't know if I was clinically dead, but I was close to it. 74/40 BP plummet due to dehydration during cancer treatment, and that value is after I woke up and was already on fluids. In short, when I went under, we were on our way to an infusion clinic. Felt nauseous, heaved, and then lost consciousness. Saw a light brown color, the sun diffusing through my eyelids. Felt like I was suspended in fluid and totally disconnected from my body. No actual input from the rest of my body. The defining component was an overwhelming feeling of peace. Like nothing else mattered, and this was my reward for suffering for several months straight. I was ready, and I was completely okay if this was it, despite my 2-year-old daughter, my wife, and everything else I was leaving behind. I'm ashamed of that feeling, somewhat, because it's not who I am, but in that moment, apparently that is what I needed to feel. Short answer is that it was the highest on life I've ever been, while dying. I had such an aura of effect on me that it completely resolved my lifelong anxiety for almost 7 to 8 years. 10 out of 10. Would have an NDE again. Edit. I forgot an important part. During treatment, I gained a very strong case of tinnitus. It was incessant and still is to this day. I don't remember what silence is, but when I went under, everything was silent. No tinnitus at all. Dead silence. That may very well have been my last thought before I woke up in the ER. Next story. My biological father said everything was dark and cold for him when he coded. He said he met his grandma and was able to give details and things they talked about. I remember when he spoke to his mom and he told her everything he had seen and spoke about. She was in disbelief and as pale as a ghost. My biological father had never met his grandma because she passed away, but overall, very interesting. Next story. I had an operation when I was 21 for gyno stuff. I ended up with golden staph. I'm 55 now. I went back in a hospital and not sure what happened, but I think I died. Long story short, I walked up the biggest spiral staircase I've ever seen. It was a long way up, but every step I took felt calmer and more peaceful. There was white light all around me, almost hugging me. I finally got to the top and a dude was standing there. I want to say it was St. Peter. I only think that because I went to Catholic schools. Anyway, I was standing next to him. He had a white robe on, white hair with a long beard and a staff in his right hand. He turned and looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Go back. It's not your time yet." I've never felt more peaceful or happier. It was beautiful in a way words can't describe. My next thought was, oh crap, now I have to walk back down all these stairs. I woke up with the nurses all around me, shaking me, talking to me, etc. I felt amazing, and I am not scared to die. Okay, so if you felt better every step you went up, did you feel worse every step you had to go down? Like just a little more existential dread and just not wanting to go back every time you took a step down, being like, man, I really got to do this? This sucks. I hope not, because that sounds, not fun. Next story. I underwent surgery, and during the operation, I felt like I had died. It was as if I were flying at a steady pace through a kind of huge tunnel or cave. There was a bright light shining at the end of the tunnel, but I felt like I could never reach that light. It's just there, shines with a warm light. The wall of this cave was lined with countless cables in black, red, and blue, stretching endlessly in every direction. As I moved forward, I glanced to the sides and saw these infinite cables accompanying me along the way. The whole scene had a cyberpunk-like feel to it. While soaring through this tunnel, I felt completely bodiless. Only my consciousness was moving forward. That was the moment I realized I was dead. But the only thing that truly hurt me was the regret. I hadn't had the chance to say goodbye to my parents, my friends, to spend just a little more time with them, to explain my situation and to let them know how much I appreciated them. I felt sad that I hadn't been able to say a proper farewell, especially to my mother. But after a short while, a sense of acceptance washed over me. I came to terms with it. I told myself that they would forgive me for leaving without a word, that they would be okay, they were in good hands, and that eventually we would meet again. This brought me peace, a feeling of tranquility, happiness, and an overwhelming sense of contentment that's hard to put into words. I was simply at peace. As I continued flying through this strange, timeless place, I suddenly saw stars. Huge, bright stars, so many of them. And I was so excited. Wow, these are the most beautiful stars I've ever seen. I was beyond thrilled that after what felt like an eternity of emptiness, I was finally seeing something, and it was breathtaking. I felt pure joy and happiness. Then, out of nowhere, I heard my mother's voice calling my name. I couldn't quite make out what she was saying after that, but I knew it was her. What was actually happening in that moment was that I had been moved to the pediatric ward after surgery. The ceiling above me was decorated with simple illustrations of stars, some kind of a childish painting. Those were the exact same stars I had seen, and I screamed of happiness. I screamed, "I see stars, Mom!" At that moment, I still felt like I was flying through the tunnel, watching the stars in the distance. But in reality, I was already waking up. I just hadn't fully realized it yet. My mother was standing beside me, talking to the nurse and the doctor. It took me a few minutes to process that the stars I was seeing were just simple drawings, but the happiness I felt when I saw them, that pure satisfaction of finally seeing something after so long in the void, I'd never been happier in my life, and I probably never will be. Maybe it was because I realized that there was still a chance I was alive, or that I was arriving somewhere where people were waiting for me, or that someone was calling me back. And then, all at once, my nervous system came back online, and the post-surgery pain hit. Next story. My mother was in the hospital with throat cancer. She had just signed a DNR that I guess wasn't on file yet because she passed in her sleep that night, but the nurse who was doing the rounds responded and brought her back. She ended up getting released to come home and spend her final days with the family. When she was at home, I was really curious, and I asked her about dying and coming back. She said she remembered hearing the nurse coming in to check on her. Then she had vivid dreams of her parents and a feeling of being at peace before waking up in the ICU. She mentioned there was no pain and no suffering, just an immense feeling of peacefulness. That talk helped me a bit with the grieving process as she died 2 weeks later peacefully in her sleep at home. Knowing there was no big traumatic event or pain was nice. Next story. I'm seeing a lot of people say nothing/blackness. If you don't believe in souls, I'm guessing that makes perfect sense. But even for those who do believe in souls, it still makes sense, right? Our earthly human brains log the experiences we have in this body. The soul would experience or log things differently, so it wouldn't see the way that eyes do, or remember the way that a brain does, etc. I don't really know where to go from here, but just thought I'd share in case anyone else wants to chime in. Next story. I drowned when I was younger. I saw nothing. I remember struggling to get to the surface. I couldn't swim, and the feeling of panic and fear. Then I remember swallowing water and how much it hurt. Then a moment of calmness where I stopped moving. The pain stopped and everything was quiet. Then nothing. Didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. Next story. I was clinically dead for 3 minutes while having all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed. It happened right after they gave me the anesthesia. I saw nothing, it was just black. Right before, I felt super dizzy. Everything was spinning. Thought I was on a roller coaster that was going to derail into the high sky down to the ground. Then I woke up to the nurse screaming that I was flatlining and to get the doctor. I then projectile vomited all over the surgeon as soon as he walked in. I was overdosed on more anesthetic, and then before I knew it, I was awake and recovering. Next story. I saw my grandma and baby brother who passed at 17 months old. They were in a meadow and across a stream. When I was walking towards them, I marveled at the luxurious colors of everything. The grass, the wild flowers, the sky, etc. Everything was a brilliant hue I'd never seen before. I could literally smell every flower and the water, and when I stepped into the stream, she said, "Hito, it's not your time yet. You still have a long time. You have to go back." I said, "I don't want to. I'm a loser. I'm fat. I'm ugly. I'm divorced. I have a drug addiction. I don't want this life anymore." She said, "It's not up to us." I said, "Who's it up to? Jesus?" She said, "You already know who." I said, "I don't." I said, "Is heaven what we think it is?" And she said, "Nothing we've ever imagined comes close." I said, "Is it beautiful?" And she said, "It's glorious." Then she told me, "Go back, Hito. It's time. And don't be afraid. We'll be waiting for you when it's the right time." Anyway, I opened my eyes just as the doctor was going to give me the paddles. He was like, "Whoa, we lost you for a few seconds, buddy." I said, "I know. My grandma said I had to come back." He kind of snickered. Next story. This isn't about me. It's about my grandma, according to my mom. Apparently, my mom went to visit my grandma who had several issues, cancer, kidney failure, etc. When she got there, my grandma told her, "I just had the most beautiful dream, but I can't describe it. There were colors we don't have the names for. They don't exist. And I felt better than I ever felt before. And my sister was there." Her sister had passed away years earlier. A few more descriptions I don't remember. Anyway, they chatted for a couple hours like normal. When my mom was ready to leave, the doctor stopped her in the hallway and said, "She's a lucky lady. We lost her for over a minute, but she came back. I haven't told her yet because she seems to be in good spirits." I know people are going to say DMT, but I've experimented with hallucinogens, including DMT. I've seen some crazy crap, but never made up colors. I also have a couple similar stories that are hard to explain with logic. Next story. Never been dead, but after an OD I experienced what I think might have been close. I remember it feeling like all of a sudden I was incredibly conscious of the act of maintaining control of my body, but that I could no longer hold on to that. I felt like an entity behind my eyes was what I was really seeing out of, and I felt it slip back away from my body, falling backwards away from the controls, so to speak. EMTs and my wife screwed it up, so that's good, I guess? I don't know. Next story. Things that looked like fish or eels floating around me. I was in space, but yet moved as if I were walking on something solid. I was then sat in a chair in a darkish room. A person in a suit sat across from me. There wasn't a verbal discussion, but there were words. I won't go into details of what was all said. To sum it up, they were disappointed that I was trying to take my own life. that I needed to go back and finish. I woke up in my bed. I could barely get out of bed or let alone stand up. Fell down so many times before calling for help on my phone. Next story. Dying is euphoric. When your body gives up, it floods your body with endorphins to help the pain and fear. For me, I could feel my limbs shut off. The right arm went full pins and needles. Then a minute later, the left arm. Then my legs. Everything was just cold and numb. I couldn't verbalize. I remember trying to ask the doctor a question, but I couldn't get past, "What?" And the doctor assumed I was asking for water and kept trying to shove a glass of water in my face. Beyond that, time just shut off. I got as far as a scanner in the hospital, and when I lied down, I fell asleep. Woke up 3 days later, tied to a bed, screaming like a maniac, "They're trying to end me!" I remember thinking, nobody's trying to end me, calm down. Just call for a nurse and ask what happened. My inner monologues were my usual calm self, but it was like I was possessed. Something else was in control of my body. I was just a helpless spectator in the back of my head, listening to it scream and thrash. It reminded me of that short from Borderlands 2 with Maya and the Psycho. Turns out I didn't sleep for 3 days. I was very much awake, screaming and frothing and attacking crap and wetting myself. I don't have any memory of it. I only have what family and friends and nurses have told me about it. A month later, I suffered heart failure. I just seized up and collapsed. Luckily, I was right outside an emergency clinic and someone brought me inside. I have never been served so fast at a clinic in my life. The nurse at reception took one look at me and rushed me inside. Something about my color, I guess. I think I was a wrong color. One nurse sat with me and did his best to calm me down, but I could hear the other nurses arguing to get a doctor over now. I heard, "He's about to go cold on us. This is what they look like before they go cold." I remember being terrified and grief-stricken, but strangely calm, like it was taking all my effort just to keep breathing. I was very conflicted, like I was relaxed and felt like it would have been okay to just let go. I've had a good run, but the logical side of my brain was reasoning back, "Don't do that, that's the trap, just keep fighting." I remember my vision went dark, like when you stand up too fast and you feel faint. Then at the center of my vision, I could see white light, which slowly got brighter until it was all blinding light and a wave of euphoria as I felt my body relax. Then I jerked back to reality. It had only felt like a second, but there were now 6 nurses in the room where before there had only been 1. It looked like 2 of them were prepping one of those electric paddle machines, but I don't think they'd used it yet. The nurse who had been watching me was saying, "See, you're okay. You're fine." But I don't remember the context. I'm pretty sure I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, but I wouldn't describe it as a tunnel. It was just a darkness from fainting and then light. Like I was receiving a signal, but I couldn't process it into an image. Like those really old TVs. When you turn them off and the image shrinks down to a tiny dot in the middle of the screen and then slowly fades away. This was that in reverse. A tiny dot that faded in and then expanded to encompass everything. It's just my eyes going limp along with the rest of my body. Nothing more. Next story. Wouldn't say clinically dead, but I was just discharged from ICU for having a first-time seizure event behind the wheel of my car at highway speeds. Miraculously managed to stop the car somehow and come out the other side unscathed for the most part. My experience, though, is very similar to many other commenters. It was very similar to a deep sleep. I just remember leaving work with a migraine, and then my next memory is having a full-blown conversation with my mother in the ICU 24 hours later. Nothing in between. Cherish the moments you got now, because I truly believe it's all we've got. No before life, no afterlife. Next story. My mom was very moved when she came back from a throat surgery. Her blood pressure had been bonkers, and the surgeon was actually afraid he'd lose her. She's a 67-year-old born and raised Catholic, and she came with this story that she was in some kind of purgatory where she met one of my aunts, the kindest, nicest one, who was obviously the first to pass, who came to meet her, hug her, and usher her to the pearly gates, or my mom's version of them. Of course I'm summarizing, but she was very affected by the experience, and she kept seeing she couldn't see my aunt's head. It was a bright beam of light, but she still knew it was her. She still gets emotional to this day. Next story. I was on holiday in Spain when I was 7 years old and slipped into the pool and drowned. I remember all of the bubbles floating past my eyes and panicking as I couldn't get to the surface. The next thing I remember is being over my body floating as my dad and the lifeguard were giving me CPR. Slowly, I was getting higher. Then, I saw my body cough and I was sucked back down real fast. The next thing I remember was being carried up some stairs by my mom to the hotel aid room and puking up loads of water. Next story. I'd have spinal surgery on an L4, L5, and sacrum. The doctor prepared me for the risk with a list of things that could happen. Good result? I'd be walking. Bad result? I'd be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of my life. The risk he told me but didn't give much thought to was the use of anesthesia meds and the amounts. I had 5 IVs, both arms and legs, with a long needle into my heart through my neck. During the surgery, I woke up and I could feel them direct someone for more meds. To finally answer your question, the only thing I felt was timeless peace. No imagery, no past relatives. It could have been the meds or the fact my heart stopped for 2 minutes. When I came to, the doctors were struggling to get my heart started or corrected. The nurse kept telling me to stay here and stay calm. I noticed we were all covered in blood. Seems like I was a squirter, and they had trouble stopping the bleeding in my neck. Overall, 5 stars experience and memory. Okay, OP, I know what you mean, but I will implore you, maybe don't use the term squirter. For some reason, I just don't think that's how you should describe it. Next story. I was in an induced coma in the hospital after a severe car accident and had pretty serious brain damage among a lot of other trauma. I woke up in the ICU and pulled out my intubation tube, chest tube, central line, and all of my IVs, and I decided to go home. Turns out that does not really work very well, at least not if you want to live. I don't remember anything after passing out, but I do remember the feeling of my body slowing down and the understanding that I was about to die. I was both terrified and too weak to do anything about it. I was brought back a few minutes later, I think. I don't actually know how long it took for them to bring me back. When I was resuscitated, I was put back into an induced coma and didn't wake back up for another week. Next story. My mother was clinically dead when giving birth to my sister, I believe. She said she saw countless images of people of different nationalities rising in the sky. A voice spoke to her and said, "All these people are passing away right now. It's not your time. You have more to do." She could feel going back into her cold body, then woke up with the needles in her arms and my father crying. Next story. When I was a kid, I had an extreme allergic reaction to a bee sting, near instant cardiac arrest. Oxygen was cut off to the brain, and that was that. Didn't see anything, didn't feel anything. It wasn't like losing consciousness or being knocked out or passing out. Even in those circumstances, there is some vague awareness or something. This was different, like being turned off. Next thing I remember, I was in a hospital bed. From my perspective, it was like I was instantaneously teleported there. I remember the bee sting, and suddenly, I was on my back in a hospital bed, like a film being spliced together. It is an extremely weird sensation to logically know that time has passed between those 2 points, but having no awareness of time actually passing. The experience of death depends on how you die. In cases of near instant death like mine, your brain really doesn't have any time to process what's happening. It basically goes right into critical shutdown/self-preservation mode. So all the cool stuff that happens as different parts of the brain gradually shuts down doesn't really happen there. That being said, there are some common themes among slower deaths. For example, the centers of the brain that handle pain and emotional processing are at the top of the list when the shutdown starts to happen. So when people say they felt at peace and their pain was going away, there's a real physical reason for that happening. As someone with allergies, I didn't know allergies could do that. I didn't know you could be so allergic that you go into cardiac arrest. I thought anaphylaxis was like the upper limit. I'm not saying OP's wrong. I genuinely just didn't know. That's crazy. I have a lot of allergies. I haven't been stung by a bee yet. I'm afraid. Next story. 2 years ago, I had a pneumonia going really bad. It resulted in a heart attack, M32, but thankfully the ambulance was there at my home. I was rushed to hospital and out in intensive care with an ECMO machine and surgery. Was out for a week. I remember nothing from like 8 hours before the incident and until they took me out of the coma. I didn't see anything. Felt like I had a night of good sleep though. But the delirium after being awake, that crap was crazy. People crawling on the walls in the hospital and other hallucinations for a whole night was rough. Thankfully, I made a full recovery, and the ICU was very professional. Denmark has a very good healthcare system. Next story. It was nearly 60 years ago, and the memory is still as fresh as a daisy. One moment, I was feeling like crap laying in my hospital bed whilst a general surgeon was examining me. The next moment, I faded out. Then I was looking down at my body as the surgeon whipped off his gloves and started heart massage. My conscious self was in a corner of the room, but on the ceiling, watching. I could see the surgeon and the other doctors, plus a nurse, and my poor mum sitting in a chair in the opposite corner with her head in her hands looking distraught. Shortly after the surgeon started the heart massage, everything faded out again. Then I became aware of some kind of tunnel with a bright light at the end. I wasn't on the ceiling. I had no idea where I was. It was all so serene, amazingly peaceful. I sensed an attraction to the source of light. I was drawn to it, but I also sensed that if I allowed my conscious self to go towards the light, I would never come back. So I turned away from the light, and here I am. Since then, I have absolutely no fear of death. Pain, yes, but death, no. For many years, I couldn't speak about my experience at all. It freaked me out until I read about all the other people who had similar experiences. For what it's worth, I'm an atheist, and Dr. Sam Parnia, a British researcher into NDEs, has used my writing in his addresses. Next story. Endless black. Like an infinitely vast void, except it wasn't a void so much as a span of darkness that filled an endless void, both empty and yet corporeal, and at the end of infinity, a slight bluish tint. Sometimes when I remember it in my dreams, there were stars, countless and beautiful, but they didn't feel friendly, looking down upon me from the peaks of the endless void, the heavens that existed more as an abyss, a limitless sea of darkness that filled the universe, yet neither hot nor cold. Instead, it felt like a calm oblivion that my soul could wander about for all eternity without thought or imagination, drifting, floating, but not quite existing, all while the stars are always there. I can't say if they felt holy or evil, more that they were things that existed above us, above my comprehension of good or evil, above my comprehension of sentient or unliving. Just witnessing them seemed to incept a fascination, a desire, a devotion that would swallow one's very existence, but at the same time inspire a desperate hope that their gaze would not cast upon you. That's the mark I feel is left upon me when I seem to recollect that experience in my dreams now and then, many years after. The experience itself was not so bad, but the dreams that followed directly after were horrible. For several days after the experience and that imagination of that immense scene, every night when I would go to sleep, I'd dream of a demon. That demon would be in the form of one of my close friends or family. It would be their face, but not their face. Them, but different, disfigured and distorted in a way that's devilish, hideous, imbalanced, and terrifying. Each time the demons would approach me, chase me, or attack me, and I don't really remember what happened after then, as fortunately those specific dreams didn't repeat, only after that experience, but they left me shaken up quite badly when I awoke each time. Next story. Not me, but my sister, technically half-sister. This will be important later. She had a massive brain aneurysm. I can't remember the specific type, but about 95% die instantly. Of those who survive the initial issue, a good chunk die in surgery. Of those who survive that, most have long-term issues. Fortunately, she has fully recovered. During the time she was dead, she said she saw her mom and our dad. Her mom died when my sister was 11 months old, also from a brain aneurysm, and our dad had died a few years prior to this. Her parents were across the way with a big pond in between. Her mom was waving her over, and our dad just looked at her without indicating what he thought she should do. At that point, she said Jesus rose from the pond and asked her what she wanted him to do. He said he could end her pain this second, and she could join her parents. Or he could send her back to live, but it would be a difficult, painful journey. She had 3 kids and remembered how hard it was living without her mother, so she decided to live. But instead of simply saying she wanted to live, she said, "Screw you, Jesus. I'm not putting my kids through that." If you knew my sister, this tracks. She was in the ICU for a couple of weeks and then in skilled nursing for about a month because she was blind for a while. They figured she would regain some of her sight, but didn't know how long it would take, so she had to learn to live as a blind person. It has been several years now and she is fully recovered, but I have no doubt that everything happened exactly as she says it did. I wonder how Jesus would feel about that. Being told to screw off. Well, okay, OP said F off, but can't say that and still get monetized. But would Jesus sort of respect it and be like, yeah, you know what, go raise those kids? Or would you still have to repent for it? That's a question for not me.